in the heart of the vibrant African village of Makali, where the sun rose over endless golden plains and the river shimmered like a trail of silver, lived a young girl named Amani. She was known by everyone for her kind heart and gentle nature, always helping others with a smile. The villagers adored her, calling her the light of Makali, because wherever she went, laughter and warmth seemed to follow. But to her father, Kato, she was something even more special, his little moon. He gave her this name because, no matter how dark the night became, Amani's spirit shined bright, filling his life with hope and light. Kato was a hard-working farmer, spending long days in the fields under the blazing sun to provide for Amani. He wasn't a wealthy man, but what they lacked in riches, they made up for with love. Amani and Kato shared an unbreakable bond, strengthened by the pain they endured when Amani's mother, Nia, passed away from illness years ago. Though the loss carved a hole in their hearts, Kato promised his daughter that they would carry on together, stronger than ever. He worked tirelessly, never letting Amani see his exhaustion, and she, in turn, stayed strong for him, believing their little family was enough. Every morning, Amani would run barefoot through the village, waving at the traders setting up their stalls and the children playing near the river. She dreamed of a future where she and her father could build a bigger house, where Kato wouldn't have to work so hard, and where maybe, just maybe, they could feel whole again. Despite the ache of her mother's absence, Amani's heart remained full of hope, and the village of Makali remained her safe, beautiful world, one where love, kindness, and dreams still lived. She never imagined that one day, everything she knew would be shattered by a stranger wearing a false smile. One day Kato returned from a neighboring village, but this time he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a woman named Adia. He introduced her to Amani as his new wife. Adia spoke softly, her voice calm and gentle, telling Amani she had always wanted a daughter. She promised to care for her like her own child. Amani, who had spent so many nights missing her mother, felt a spark of hope in her heart. She had longed for a mother's warmth, and now it seemed like that wish had finally come true. The villagers were curious about Adia, but she quickly won them over. She greeted everyone with kindness and spoke to them like they were old friends. She praised their hard work and even offered to help with village tasks, though she never seemed to actually do much. Still, her words were enough to make people trust her. They admired Kato for finding someone who seemed so caring, and they felt happy for Amani, believing she finally had the mother figure she deserved. Adia didn't just charm the villagers. She poured her affection onto Amani too. She smiled warmly, held Amani's hand, and told her how lucky she was to have such a strong, hard-working father. She called her my sweet girl, and told her they were going to be a real family now. Amani, who had spent years dreaming of a mother's love, believed her without hesitation. She wanted to believe Adia's promises were real. At home, Adia settled in quickly. She rearranged things, saying she wanted to make the place more comfortable for their new family. Amani watched her, feeling hopeful about the future. For the first time in a long while, laughter filled their little home. Kato looked happier than he had in years. He spent his days working in the fields with renewed energy, knowing Adia was waiting for him when he returned. Seeing her father happy made Amani's heart feel lighter. Every evening, Adia would talk to Amani, asking about her day and telling her stories about the village she came from. Amani listened eagerly, hanging on to her every word. It felt good to have someone to talk to again, someone who cared. She wanted to believe this was the start of a new, better life. Amani ignored the small, uncomfortable moments that sometimes crept in, like how Adia's voice, usually so warm, would turn cold when no one else was around, or how her smile would vanish the second Kato left the room. Amani told herself she was imagining it. After all, Adia had promised to love her, and Amani desperately wanted that promise to be true. She didn't see the truth hiding behind Adia's kind words. She didn't notice the way Adia watched her father, her eyes calculating and distant when no one was looking. Amani only saw what she wanted to see, a chance to have a mother again. She didn't realize that Adia wasn't there to complete their family. She was there for something else entirely, and soon enough, the warmth Amani felt would be replaced by something far colder. As the days passed, things began to change, but only when Kato wasn't around to see it. Each morning, he would leave for the fields with a smile, kissing Amani on the forehead and thanking Adia for taking care of their home. Adia would return his smile sweetly, waving him off like the perfect wife and stepmother. But the moment he disappeared from view, her entire face seemed to shift. The softness in her eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp. Her voice, once so gentle, turned harsh and commanding. Amani barely had time to understand what was happening before Adia started barking orders at her. She told Amani to sweep the floors, wash the clothes, and fetch water from the river, all before breakfast. Adia would sit back, watching her with an unreadable expression as she worked. When Amani finally finished, breathless and tired, Adia wouldn't praise her or even thank her. Instead, she would sigh and shake her head, calling her slow and useless. She'd remind Amani that she wasn't good enough to be her daughter, that she was just a burden Kato was too blind to see. At first, Amani thought maybe Adia was just having a bad day. She tried harder, hoping her new mother would see her effort and be proud of her, but no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. The chores grew longer. Amani scrubbed the floors until her hands were raw. She cooked meals, but wasn't allowed to eat until Adia had her fill. She tended to the animals, even when the sun burned her skin and her legs felt too weak to stand. Adia, meanwhile, would rest comfortably under the shade of their home, eating the best food and drinking sweet tea that Kato had traded for in the market. When Amani's stomach growled, Adia would laugh quietly to herself and tell her, "Only strong girls deserve to eat, and you're not strong, are you?" Amani wanted to believe it was all a mistake, that maybe she had done something wrong to make Adia so cruel. But no matter what she did, the kindness Adia once showed never returned. It only got worse. Still, when Kato came home in the evening, Adia's cruel side vanished like smoke. She would greet him with a warm smile, wrapping her arm around Amani and pretending they had spent the day bonding like a real mother and daughter. She told Kato stories about how Amani helped her with everything and how proud she was of her. Kato believed every word, smiling with relief that his family seemed to be happy. Amani never corrected her. She wanted to. The truth burned inside her, desperate to come out. But every time she looked at her father's tired, hopeful face, her heart clenched. He looked so happy, so peaceful, thinking that his family was finally whole again. Amani couldn't bear to take that happiness away from him, so she stayed quiet. She swallowed the insults. She hid the bruises on her knees from scrubbing the floors too hard. She forced a smile at the dinner table, even when her stomach ached from hunger. Every night she told herself that maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe Adia would remember her promises and treat her like a daughter again. But tomorrow never got better. And soon Amani began to realize that Adia's warmth wasn't coming back. The woman who once promised to love her like her own child was gone, and in her place was someone who looked the same but carried a heart filled with cruelty. Amani was trapped, and the worst part was, no one knew. One afternoon, while Kato was working in the fields, and Amani finished her chores earlier than usual, she decided to go to the village market. She loved the market. The smell of roasted maize, the sound of traders calling out their best prices, and the children running around laughing. It was one of the few places that still made her feel like a normal girl, even if the weight of Adia's cruelty followed her everywhere. As she wandered between the stalls, Amani spotted Adia in the distance, standing near the edge of the market where the trees cast long shadows. Amani tilted her head in confusion. Adia never came to the market alone. She always sent Amani to fetch what she wanted. Curious, Amani stepped closer, keeping herself hidden behind a stack of woven baskets. Adia wasn't alone. She was speaking to a man, a stranger Amani had never seen before. He wore a dark cloak, his face partly hidden. Amani's heart began to race. Something about the way they stood close together, whispering, felt wrong. She couldn't hear them at first, but then Adia's voice became clearer, her words sharp and bitter. "The fool trusts me," Adia hissed. "Soon I'll have everything." His land, his gold, and the girl won't be a problem anymore. Amani froze. Her mind struggled to make sense of what she had just heard. Was she talking about Kato? Her father? The words echoed in her head. The girl won't be a problem anymore. Was Adia talking about her? Her stomach twisted painfully. Adia wasn't just mean. She was planning something terrible. Amani's heart pounded so loudly she was afraid they might hear it. She wanted to run, to tell her father, to scream for the whole village to hear, but her legs felt glued to the ground. She peeked again, hoping she misunderstood, but Adia's face was clear now. It wasn't the face of the kind, caring woman who had once promised to be her mother. It was cold and full of hatred. Amani barely recognized her. The stranger nodded, then slipped something small and wrapped in cloth into Adia's hand. She tucked it into her clothes quickly, looking around to make sure no one saw. Amani didn't know what it was, but she knew it couldn't be good. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe she was wrong, that maybe Adia didn't mean those awful words the way they sounded. But deep down, she knew the truth. Adia wasn't here to be a part of their family. She was here to take everything from them. Before Amani could think of what to do next, Adia glanced toward the market stalls. Amani's heart leapt into her throat. For a second, it felt like Adia's eyes landed right on her. Panicked, Amani ducked down, pressing herself against the baskets. She held her breath, her hands trembling. After a moment, she heard footsteps moving away. She peeked again and saw Adia walking calmly back toward the village, her expression once again soft and sweet, the mask she wore so well. Amani stayed hidden for a long time, her mind spinning. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. Adia wasn't who she pretended to be, and if Amani didn't find a way to stop her, she was afraid her father wouldn't live long enough to see the truth. That night, everything seemed normal at first. Kato came home from the field, tired but smiling as usual. Amani watched him sit down at the table while Adia served dinner, her voice sweet and caring, asking him about his day. Amani couldn't stop thinking about what she had overheard at the market, but she was too afraid to speak. She wanted to believe she was wrong, that maybe Adia didn't mean those horrible words the way they sounded. But as the meal went on, something felt off. Kato looked more tired than usual. His smile seemed weaker. Amani noticed Adia watching him closely, too closely, like she was waiting for something. Every time Kato took a bite, her eyes flickered with a strange light, almost like excitement. After dinner, Kato stood up, but his legs wobbled beneath him. He stumbled, catching himself on the table. Amani jumped to her feet, panic rising in her chest. "Baba?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kato tried to smile, brushing it off, but his face was pale, and sweat was already gathering on his forehead. Before Amani could say anything else, he collapsed. Amani screamed, rushing to his side. Adia was there in an instant, pretending to panic. She called for help, her voice high and worried. But when no one else was looking, Amani saw it, a flicker of a smile on Adia's face. It was quick, barely there, but Amani saw it. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who was getting exactly what they wanted. Amani's heart pounded in her chest. The words she heard at the market came rushing back. Soon I'll have everything, his land, his gold, and the girl won't be a problem anymore. Adia helped Kato to bed, fussing over him and telling Amani not to worry, that she would take care of everything. But Amani didn't believe her anymore. She couldn't, not after what she had seen. That night, long after Adia had gone to sleep, Amani snuck out of the house and into the garden behind their home. It was overgrown now, but she remembered it well. Her mother, Nia, used to tend to it every day. She would hum softly as she picked herbs and told Amani stories about how each plant had a special purpose. Amani hadn't touched the garden since her mother died. It felt too painful, but now she felt like her mother's memory was the only thing that could save her father. Her hands shook as she searched the garden, trying to remember what her mother used to say. Finally, she found the plant her mother called the healer's gift. Nia once told her it could pull the sickness from a person's body if given in time. Amani gathered as much as she could carry and slipped back inside the house. For the next few days, Kato barely woke up. Adia continued to act like a loving, worried wife, but Amani saw the truth. She saw the way Adia barely bothered to feed him. She noticed how Adia smiled when he coughed or groaned in his sleep. Amani didn't care what Adia said anymore. She crushed the herbs, mixing them with water, and snuck into her father's room each night to spoon it into his mouth, praying it would work. Slowly, Kato began to improve. His fever faded, his breathing became steadier, and colour returned to his face. Amani's heart filled with hope. She knew her mother was watching over them, guiding her hand. Adia noticed too, and she wasn't happy. The moment Kato was strong enough to sit up on his own, Amani caught Adia staring at him from the doorway, her face twisted with anger. There was no sweetness now, no warmth. She looked furious. For the first time, Adia's mask slipped completely. Amani realized then that Adia wasn't going to stop. Saving her father once wouldn't be enough. Adia wanted him gone, and Amani knew she had to find a way to stop her for good. Late one night, Amani woke suddenly. The house was quiet except for her father's soft, steady breathing. He was getting better, slowly, but she still worried. Something felt wrong. She didn't know why, but her chest felt tight, like a warning she couldn't ignore. Then she heard it, a faint rustling sound from outside. Her heart raced. She slipped out of bed as quietly as she could and moved to the window. The moonlight was dim, but she could make out a figure moving near the back of their hut. Amani squinted, trying to see through the darkness. It was Adia. Amani's breath caught in her throat. Why would Adia be outside so late? Careful not to make a sound, Amani crept through the hut and slipped out the back door, keeping low to the ground. She hid behind a large clay pot near the wall and watched. Adia was kneeling in the dirt, her hands working fast. Amani's eyes widened as she realized Adia was digging. The soil was loose, like it had been disturbed before. Amani watched, confused and afraid, as Adia pulled something out of the ground, a small, cloth-wrapped pouch. Adia untied the pouch and poured its contents into her hand. Gold coins and shining pieces of jewelry tumbled out, glittering even in the dim moonlight. Amani's eyes widened in shock. She recognized those treasures. Her father had shown them to her once, long ago. He called them his little moon's future. He told her he was saving them for when she was older, for her education, her wedding, or whatever dream she wanted to chase. He worked hard every day, little by little, to add to that hidden pouch. Amani felt her throat tighten. How did Adia know about it? She barely had time to think before Adia spoke, her voice low and bitter. Once the old man's gone, Adia muttered to herself, I'll leave this cursed village with everything. His land, his gold, everything. Amani felt like the ground had been pulled from under her. The truth hit her like a cold wave. Adia never loved her father. She never cared about Amani. All the kindness, the sweet words, it was all a lie. Adia only wanted what they had. She was waiting for Kato to die so she could take everything and leave. Before she could stop herself, Amani gasped. It was quiet, but in the stillness of the night, it was loud enough. Adia's head snapped up. For a moment, neither of them moved. The moonlight caught Adia's face, and Amani saw it clearly. Not the gentle, loving stepmother the village knew, but the real Adia. Her eyes were cold and sharp, her face twisted with anger and something else, fear. Amani felt her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Adia slowly stood up, the pouch of gold clutched tightly in her hand. Her voice was low and dangerous now, nothing like the sweet, caring woman Amani once trusted. So, Adia said quietly, stepping toward her, you've been watching me, little girl. Amani's throat was dry. She couldn't speak. Adia took another step closer. It's a shame you saw this, she said, her voice dripping with false pity. You should have stayed asleep. For the first time, Amani realized she wasn't just in danger. Adia wasn't going to let her walk away from this. Adia's eyes burned with fury as she stepped closer to Amani, the pouch of stolen gold clenched tightly in her hand. Before Amani could move, Adia lunged forward, grabbing her wrist with a bruising grip. Amani gasped, fear freezing her in place. You ungrateful brat, Adia hissed, her voice low and dangerous. Her face was twisted with rage, nothing like the sweet, caring stepmother everyone in the village believed her to be. If you tell anyone, your father won't wake up next time. Amani's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. Her mind raced. Adia wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous. And now Amani knew too much. Adia yanked her toward the hut, dragging her through the doorway and slamming the door shut behind them. The room was dark, shadows flickering from the dying fire. Kato lay in his bed, still weak and unaware of the danger surrounding him. Amani's chest tightened. She couldn't let Adia win. Her father's life depended on her. Amani struggled against Adia's grip, twisting and pulling with everything she had. Fear fueled her strength. She stomped on Adia's foot, and the woman let out a sharp cry of pain. For a split second, her grip loosened. That was all Amani needed. She wrenched free and ran, faster than she had ever run in her life. Her bare feet hit the dirt path hard, but she didn't stop. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her heart racing. The village was quiet, the moon casting long shadows over the huts. Amani didn't care if she woke the whole village. She had to find someone, anyone, who could help. Her mind went to one person, Baba Themba, the village elder. He was wise and fair, and everyone respected him. He would listen. He had to. Amani sprinted toward his hut, her legs aching, but she didn't slow down. When she reached his door, she pounded on it with both fists, tears streaming down her face. "Baba Themba!" she cried, her voice shaking. "Please wake up! It's Amani! Please help me!" For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Panic began to rise in her chest. What if he didn't hear her? What if Adia caught up to her first? Then, the door creaked open. Baba Themba stood there, his eyes tired but kind. He looked at Amani, his expression shifting to concern when he saw her tear-streaked face and trembling frame. "Amani?" he said gently. "Child, what's wrong?" The moment she heard his voice, the fear that had been holding her together broke. The words poured out of her between sobs. Everything she had seen, everything Adia had done. She told him about the cruel treatment, the whispered plans, the poisoned food, and the stolen gold meant for her future. "She said my father won't wake up next time," Amani choked out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, Baba Themba, you have to help us. She's going to hurt him." Baba Themba's face darkened. He reached out and placed a comforting hand on Amani's shoulder, his voice low but steady. "You did the right thing coming to me, child," he said softly. "We will stop this." Amani stared up at him, hope flickering in her chest for the first time in days. She wasn't alone anymore, and she wasn't going to let Adia win. By dawn, the village was awake and gathered in the central clearing. Baba Themba stood tall, his voice calm but powerful as he called everyone together. The sun was rising behind him, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Amani stood close to him, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her, but she kept her head high. She wasn't afraid anymore. Kato, still weak but standing with the support of a villager, arrived too. His face lit up when he saw Amani, and she felt a spark of strength from his familiar, loving smile. He didn't know everything yet, but he trusted her. That was all she needed. Adia appeared moments later, her face the picture of heartbreak. She rushed to Kato's side, her voice trembling with fake concern. "Oh, Kato," she cried dramatically. "I don't know what's happening. Amani has been acting so strange. She's lying about me. She's just jealous because I love you and want to be her mother." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some villagers looked uncertain, others frowned, confused. Amani felt her throat tighten. What if they believed Adia's lies? But she couldn't stop now. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear swirling inside her. "She's lying," Amani said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She never loved us. She wanted to take everything. My father's gold, his land, even his life." Adia gasped, playing the part of the wounded, innocent wife perfectly. "How could you say that?" she whimpered, tears glistening in her eyes. "After everything I've done for you." For a moment the crowd wavered. Then Amani took a deep breath. "I can prove it," she said firmly. The villagers murmured, surprised. Baba Themba nodded at her, encouraging her to go on. Amani turned and walked towards the back of their hut. The villagers followed, Kato moving slowly beside them. Adia stayed frozen in place, her eyes narrowing as she watched. Amani knelt by the spot where she'd seen Adia dig the night before. With trembling hands, she clawed at the dirt. The crowd was silent, holding their breath. Amani dug deeper, her fingers scraping against something rough. She pulled at it, and there it was, the cloth pouch, dirt-streaked but unmistakable. Gold coins and sparkling jewelry spilled from the torn fabric, glittering in the sunlight. Gasps filled the air. Kato's eyes widened in shock. That's my savings, he said, his voice barely a whisper. For Amani's future. Adia's expression shifted in an instant. The sweetness and sorrow drained from her face, replaced by something cold and ugly. Her body tensed, and her eyes burned with fury. Her voice came out low and venomous, dripping with hatred. "I never loved any of you," she spat, her voice rising with each word. "I only wanted the gold, and that pathetic man was my way to get it." The villagers recoiled, stunned. Adia's mask had finally fallen. Kato stared at her, betrayal and heartbreak etched on his face. Amani felt tears sting her eyes, but she stood tall. The truth was out. Adia couldn't hurt them anymore. The village fell into stunned silence after Adia's vicious confession. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. The sweet, caring woman they all believed Adia to be was gone, replaced by the cruel, greedy truth. Then the murmurs began, quiet at first, but they grew louder, filled with anger and disbelief. Villagers shook their heads, their faces twisted with betrayal. They had welcomed Adia into their homes, into their lives, and she had fooled them all. "She lied to us," one man shouted. "She tried to kill Kato," a woman added, her voice trembling with rage. "She wanted to steal everything," another cried. The crowd's anger boiled over and they turned toward Adia. Her face paled as she realized there was no more pretending, no more lies. The mask was gone, and the village had seen her true face. Baba Temba stepped forward, his expression grave. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of final judgment. "Adia," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You have betrayed not only Kato and Amani, but the entire village of Makali. We trusted you. We welcomed you into our hearts and homes. And you repaid us with poison and greed." Adia's eyes darted around, desperate for someone to defend her, but all she met were cold, angry stares. No one believed her anymore. No one pitied her. "You are no longer welcome here," Baba Temba declared. His voice was strong, unwavering. "Leave Makali and never return." The villagers murmured their agreement. Justice had been spoken. Adia's face twisted with fury, but she knew there was no escape. She turned to Kato, her voice bitter. "You're a fool," she spat. "You and your useless daughter deserve each other." Kato didn't flinch. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were on Amani, his brave, strong daughter, the one who had saved him, saved their family, and revealed the truth. Without another word, Adia turned and walked away, her steps heavy with defeat. The villagers watched in silence until she disappeared into the trees. Kato, his voice broken but filled with love, spoke softly. "Amani, I'm so sorry." His eyes filled with tears. "I should have seen the truth. I should have protected you." Amani's eyes welled up too, but she shook her head gently. "You didn't know Baba. She fooled everyone." Kato's arms wrapped around her, holding her close. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amani felt safe. Her father was alive. The village knew the truth, and Adia was gone. "You are my little moon," Kato whispered. "You saved me. You saved us." The villagers cheered for Amani, the girl who uncovered the truth and saved her father. And though their family had been broken, Amani knew they would heal, because they still had each other, and that was enough. The days after Adia's banishment were quiet, but filled with a sense of relief. The weight that had suffocated Amani and her father was finally gone. The house, once filled with whispered insults and cruel glances, now felt warm and safe again. Kato, though still recovering from his illness, seemed lighter. He smiled more. He laughed again, a sound Amani had almost forgotten. They worked together to rebuild their life, stronger than before. Kato returned to his fields, his strength slowly returning with each passing day. Amani stayed by his side, helping him plant and harvest, their hands covered in dirt, but their hearts full of hope. The villagers, once fooled by Adia's false kindness, now looked at Amani with admiration. They no longer saw just a quiet, gentle girl. They saw someone brave, someone who had faced evil and didn't back down. Children gathered around her, wide-eyed, asking to hear the story again. The tale of how she uncovered Adia's lies and saved her father spread through Makali like wildfire. They started calling her the moon who shined through shadows, a tribute to the way she brought light to the darkest parts of their lives. At first, Amani blushed when she heard the name, but over time, she grew into it. She wasn't the same girl who once dreamed of a mother's love. She wasn't the girl who quietly accepted cruelty to protect her father's happiness. She was someone new, stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky bloomed with stars, Kato sat with Amani outside their hut. The cool breeze carried the smell of blooming flowers. Fireflies danced in the distance. Kato looked at his daughter, pride shining in his eyes. "I would be proud of you," he said softly. "I am proud of you." Amani leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart full. She didn't need a stepmother to fill the hole in her life. She had her father, and he had her. That was enough. The village never forgot her story. It was told and retold, passed down from parents to children, and each time they remembered the lesson. Even the brightest smile can hide the darkest heart, but truth will always rise. And Amani? She never stopped being the light in her father's life, but now she was also a light for the whole village. A reminder that courage, no matter how small it seems, can defeat even the deepest shadow.